Okay, so in theory, we are all live now. I'm sure my phone will go off if we don't. We're not streaming for whatever reason. So welcome to everyone for the first in our series of the Fired Up, Not Burnt Out webinar. I'm joined here today by some incredible panelists. I'm joined here by Sarah Haddam, who's the VP of Growth at Planday. Good morning, Sarah.
Morning. Good start. Remembered to unmute myself, so that's a win. Hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And also Emily Cox, who's Head of Account Management at Square UK.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Also a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. You've just got back from a holiday as well today. So
Yes. It was 30-degree weather every day. I was in the Caribbean, and it's a bit of a shock to come back and, I'm in a knitted cardigan today.
But yes, you've come back on the best day. The weather has definitely taken a bit of a turn. I was in Ireland last week myself, and I just missed 6 weeks of pure sunshine in Ireland, and it was just heavy wind, heavy rain the entire week. But still, it's good to have the time off. And Louise Jackson is also going to join us, who's the general manager at Vintage Inns, who's just having a couple of technical difficulties this morning. So. Welcome to the webinar. Good people is good business, and Planday have developed a manager's toolkit for driving success in hospitality teams. This session is part of a series we've created with Planday in partnership, and today we'll be exploring burnout in the hospitality sector, discussing practical strategies and reviewing tools to help combat this issue. We know the industry thrives on passion, but without taking care of our people, burnout has become a critical challenge. Together, we'll dive into how we can tackle burnout and build better, more resilient teams. So one of the key issues highlighted in Planday's research is unpredictable schedules, which is a big part of Planday's work and something that we've been working with them on now for this is our second year. 69% of shift workers report feeling exhausted due to shifts changing with little or no notice. This is a critical area where we can reduce burnout and increase job satisfaction. So Sarah, from Planday's perspective, how can technology like the scheduling features within your platform help managers create more predictable and flexible schedules whilst also meeting the needs of the business?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, obviously, as you said, we've done this in conjunction, so I'm going to be very much like systems are the solution. And, I think I do truly believe that in this sense as well. And I feel that come through in how Planday kind of utilize systems as it's a solution, but it's also an enabler to giving you that free time. So when we look at how, a system like Planday or any other kind of scheduling software would help you as a manager and also as an employee, it's things like helping you create predictable schedules, making suggestions and recommendations based upon data that you've got, whether that's data on employees and what their likes are or needs that fit around, their ability to work, their own lifestyle, but also, at the end of the day, we know that people have businesses to run and employees want secure jobs. Your job's more secure, the more effective your business is. So it can also use things like data from your inventory systems or, weather data to create predictable schedules using, clever insights from around you. So one, it's using more informed data and other variables to go, actually, how can we give you a schedule that not only works, but it sings and it makes your business and your service and everything that you're doing great and, makes your employees feel good because you've got the right level of staff on schedule, they've got the right people to give the service they want to be able to provide. So overall, things like predictable schedules or draft schedules or, using templates or as we move into the future of technology, predictive schedules or, insight-driven schedules, things like that, I get really excited about because that's where you can use that technology to go, not only do these work, they're great, they're adaptable and they adjust based upon real-time human needs and human behavior. And it serves the manager of the business of going, I want to obviously support my employees and be a great boss and give great service, but I also need to be conscious of my bottom line. And it supports the employees by going, you want to come to work and feel like you've got the right resources, the right teammates around you, and also the opportunity to have a little bit of a predictable schedule with some flexibility around your needs. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to know what your work and life balance is ahead of time, and also to reduce the administrative burden of actually spending time doing that, because most people will get to Sunday night and go, oh God, we got to go again. We've got to plan it all. And it's so challenging in that respect, right?
Yeah, and like I can't, I worked in hospitality for a long time when I was younger, and I'm a 9 to 5. I'm not sure who does a 9 to 5 nowadays, but a salaried worker, and I have a degree of predictability. But if you don't, you don't want to be constantly thinking about like, am I doing that shift? Am I not? Do I need to text this person? Do I need to check in on this? Oh, I thought I was working and that's now changed. That unpredictability, for anyone is going to lead to things like stress, anxiety, uncertainty around, like what you're going to earn that month. Like, how does that factor into what you're going to be able to afford to pay for your bills? So when you think about burnout, it's not necessarily like the amount of time that you're working. It's the time that you spend thinking about what's going to be, when are you working, what are you working, and everything around that. So I think if you can give some consistency, some solidity, and some repeatability around schedules, both for the manager, it's got to reduce some headaches, but also for the employee, it's just giving them some certainty around, life. And I know it's a much bigger thing in the UK. Planday are a company that were born and grown in the Nordics, and they have a very different approach to some of their contracts there. So that's what we try and bring across here and say, let's learn from some of the work-life balance they have through every sector in places like the Nordics, and see how we can support encouraging that in the UK via like a system.
Yeah, for sure. And having visited the offices, seeing paddleboards stacked up so that you could go paddleboarding during your lunch break, it was like, that's pretty cool. Not sure how many people want to paddleboard down the Thames, but it's definitely a different societal culture that also helps breed that into an organization, right? It does influence that. So Emily, from one TOM for businesses is helping people stay on top of workload without burning out. How do you see businesses you work with approach scheduling and planning to help with this?
Yeah, and I'm going to touch on kind of rather echo a little bit of what Sarah and yourself have just said to give a bit of context. So my team at Square look after a range of businesses, and most of that is in the hospitality sector. And I think one thing to keep in mind is even within the hospitality sector, there's a lot of variety, right? There's quick service, there's full service, you're at a pub, you're at a bar. But one thing that consistently comes up is that element of juggling shifts, bookings, and when to staff for peak hours, and doing all of that without tipping your team into a state of burnout. Sarah, you talked a little bit about kind of that mental energy that gets used up as well. And so within that, kind of the best in class hospitality operators I see invest in really clear and predictable scheduling, right? So they set up recurring shift patterns so that staff can plan their lives around work rather than squeezing their social calendars into those kind of like last minute openings. And one of Square's team management tools, for instance, lets managers build recurring shifts as templates. So you could have, say, like a server A is going to work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 4 till 9 p.m. And then you can push those out in advance. And when everyone knows their schedule, 2 weeks ahead, it eliminates that kind of, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. text chain of who can cover this shift. And I would say that it's more than just kind of blocking slots on a calendar. A lot of businesses that, myself and my team work with use kind of that data. Sarah, you alluded to this as well, kind of the reporting around labor as well as sales forecasting to understand exactly when you're going to be busy, right? So if you know, for example, that your wine bar's likely to spike on a Thursday and a Friday between the hours of 5 to 7, you can staff accordingly for that. And so in doing so, you avoid both understaffing, which exhausts your bartenders, and you avoid overstaffing, which obviously wastes your payroll pounds, because by forecasting footfall and tying it into the actual sales metrics, it's captured all directly within our systems, from our point of sale to our dashboards to our kind of like team management tools. You can adjust accordingly week on week. And I would say that, those are two practical things. The more people first angle that I really want to ground us in is that when teams feel that they have control over their hours, they report lower stress, and importantly, they have higher job satisfaction, right? And so in doing those kind of scheduling shifts, you set out blackout dates, you allow people to opt into whenever it fits the right path for them. You empower your managers and you empower your staff to really take ownership of their week and their month, and less likely to be doing on-call firefighting. So all these features combined kind of create that smoother workflow and help hospitality teams stay on top of the work that they're running.
Yeah, and it's taking that paradigm of you work to live rather than live to work, and
exactly
right.
Exactly. So it's really trying to flip that on its head and kind of prioritize your employees' well-beings through using kind of tools and systems.
Lovely. Thank you, Emily. And Louise, welcome. You've worked in hospitality for so many years, and you also run teams. You've run teams successfully for many businesses, including your own currently. So how have you seen unpredictable schedules impact your teams, and what steps have you taken to improve those scheduling practices?
So we run 3 to 4 weeks ahead with our rotas. The only time that we don't, we all know hospitality is very unpredictable, and you have to expect the unexpected at any time, but we always do try to run 3 to 4 weeks ahead with our rotas. Like Emily touched on, the recurring shift patterns and building that into your rotas. We have a system like that here, which is lovely because I can just put everybody's set shifts on and it just automates that. It's lovely. My team are very good at coming to me and saying, I need to work X amount per week. Can I have these set days? It works with my school runs. It works with, my home life. I have my children this weekend. And we build the rotas around them. Basically, I have a very little team that will do anything and everything and they don't mind. So their shifts change every week and that's what they like. They like the change. It doesn't get samey and boring and everything. But I do have a lot of people that just work set shifts. They know what they're doing. Every shift's the same. And that's that.
Have you ever had a situation where you've worked for an organization and you haven't had that flexibility? And if so, what impact did that have on you? Louise?
Sorry, my connection just went.
So
yeah, I got you back.
Have you worked for an organization before where you didn't have that level of flexibility? And if so, what impact did that have on your work-life balance or just general mental health?
Yeah, back in London, we very unpredictable, late night bar, opened at 4 p.m. And it was just insane. It was oh my God, I'm on a Sunday. Someone's just phoned in sick. I need someone to cover a Monday. I can't do it. I have stock. I have this. I have that. What's the rota for next week? Oh, this person's just booked a last minute concert. This person's just on this, because they don't have their rotas. They're just booking things for their lives. And as managers, we go, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Absolutely. Have your time off. We don't mind that. But oh no, who's going to work? What are we going to do? And then the rest of the team are going, well, I have plans. I can't come in and cover. And then your business suffers because you're short and you can't give the service that you're supposed to be giving. And then obviously that takes a hit on your payroll and everything else. And you're like, oh no. Yeah, the late nights worrying and sitting on the bus at 5 a.m, traveling home going, oh, I'm going to have to go back in 3 hours. I'm going to have to be back there in 3 hours because I've got nobody else to do it. And it is just, my mental health was in the bin.
I think that leads us on nicely to the next question, which is based on the research Planday did, 31% of shift workers find their managers' communication confusing, which is a huge red flag for businesses within the hospitality space that are often fast-paced. And there's something that you mentioned there, which I think we can delve into a little bit deeper here, which is the lack of consistency or communication with processes and structures whereby you're having to do mental gymnastics to remember, oh, I've given that person a day off, but this one's suddenly come in. There's no clear, rigid structure that says to people, right, you put your hours in by this date, and if you don't, they're declined. What you're trying to do is keep not only your customers happy, but you're trying to keep your team happy as well. So, Sarah, how can tech help managers communicate with their teams more effectively without overwhelming them with too many channels?
Yeah, I mean, I think the overwhelm thing is that an interesting place to start for me, especially, and I'm sure everyone, you know, even if you're in or outside of hospitality, it's Instagram, it's WhatsApp, it's LinkedIn, it's Slack, it's Teams, it's email, it's every single channel under the sun, right? So I think where we see like there's an opportunity is where you've got centralized communication for a work, similar to how, you know, you would have if you're an office worker like me. At least I can just shut that down or step away from it. It in a sense, even though it might still be in the back of my mind, like you say, Louise, on the way home from work. But if you can have a centralized comms platform, or even rules, you know, we're realistic that not everyone is always going to be a large enough business to have a platform that might have inbuilt comms, like, you know, something like Square, Planday, or other providers, where you can actually say, let's keep it in here. When you want to change a shift, you can do that within the system. Someone can accept it. It can automatically change. In fact, actually, your manager is none the wiser that it's happened, other than that it's been self-resolved and it's also updated onto the shift itself. So actually, in that theory, we think that's a great experience for everyone. But I also, you know, think it's important to know what Louise says, where some businesses, they do live and breathe in WhatsApp still, or someone will be like, oh, I've just messaged you here. And it's actually, you know, a bit of a mental shift of an industry as well, of going, actually, how do we move away from some of those personal comms channels and protect that space for people, so that when you do leave the office, it's not people messaging you on WhatsApp, or you think, oh, I've seen that message, but I'm not going to respond because I've got plans, or I don't want to work tomorrow, even though I know I could. It's my one day off, and I feel like now I'm going to swap because I love Louise and she needs to do that. And it gives you a little bit of boundary setting by just going, I haven't seen it and it's in that work thing, I can protect my space. So yeah, systems where you can keep comms within the one space, and actually not only is sending that message asking for the swap, someone accepts it, done, dusted, everyone's none the wiser, and it's all done. Not only are you communicating, you're getting a secondary benefit from that. So yeah, I think that's where we see the opportunity to use comms to protect out of work boundaries.
Amazing. Thank you, Sarah. And Emily, what about yourself? How does Square support your team members in keeping communication not just strong, but also clear and relevant to the timing of their work?
Yeah. And I would say, probably on a personal note, my team would tell me that I still have, you know, improvements to make in the way that I give my communications. I think a lot of it starts from the manager, but kind of specific to the hospitality sector, and really similar to what Sarah was saying. I think we have to accept that there is unpredictability in this sector. You know, Louise, you gave a very personal kind of anecdote there earlier, but juggling those last minute absence requests, unexpected rushes, they're going to happen, but we can make them less painful, as Sarah was alluding to, by using tools that are specific to that work environment, right? So it was built for the hospitality roller coaster. I talked a little bit earlier around our Square shifts and how you can do kind of recurring shift templates there, but a further feature rather is what we call embedded shift notes, and on-the-fly swap and coverage. So say you need to remind your staff that we're launching a new summer cocktail tomorrow, maybe next week once the weather's gone better. Instead of having to kind of do a frantic WhatsApp chain about it, you can just pin it to the shift that when it starts, and say, hey, you know, within this shift, this is our new cocktail starting. So anybody who logs into that shift will see that pop up and will be aware of it. With the Plus version, you can also allow your employees to swap with each other right inside the app. And I think, you know, very much what Sarah was saying, as opposed to using kind of existing personal tools, using a particular kind of like Square app built for your employees and for your business really keeps what we talked about earlier of that work and life kind of balance and integration a little bit cleaner. So you avoid texting everybody at 2 a.m. being like, who can cover this table? You allow your people to kind of, you know, barter among themselves, and you can communicate through that as well. I think another thing that often we hear and see in the hospitality sector is communicating like menu updates and menu management across multiple locations. So it's not just within the shift itself, but say you've got a place in London, you've also got somewhere, Manchester, Brighton, wherever your businesses are. You as a manager can centrally do that from your dashboard, right? So you can create a new menu and you can select which locations it's going to go out to. And so say you've got a new, I don't know, garlic flatbread out and you want it at 2 venues, but not all 3, you can just select where those go. You don't need to do a late night re-entry or a late night call to the Manchester branch being like, did you get it? You can see that it's there. And so it gives you as a manager that peace of mind. And then using those internal tools, you can communicate to your people as and when they come to their shifts as to what do they need to be aware of. And so kind of combining that level of clarity with consistency ensures that your teams, wherever they are all on the same page, right? Without those endless text changes and manual updates. So less of, who didn't see the memo and more about delighting your guests.
I'm not even sure what that was, but Emily's workplace now dances to Spice Girls every morning at 10:20 just to get ready.
I'm going to have to figure out what that was. There is a meeting going on outside in our common area, so Spice Girls it is for a Tuesday morning.
Insight into Square's culture there. I like it. I like it a lot. Louise, what about yourself? So with your work currently and how you work with your team, how do you keep clear and effective communication on a regular basis?
Unfortunately, we are still WhatsApp, going against everything that everyone has said. Most of my team are very scared of technology. So they like it on WhatsApp. We listened and we did try, we moved to Teams and we've tried to push out Microsoft Teams. You can toggle, you can change your work-life balance and you can have it no notifications when you're off, and that's lovely. But they're very scared of tech, very scared sometimes. So we do manage everything on WhatsApp. Again, they do get told, mute it when you're on holiday and just ignore it when you're off, please. But they like having their rotas put there. It's just easy for them to open, and any important updates, we've got a pre-shift brief every day, gets filled out. Any important updates go at the little bottom, and they all know, you've got e-learning to do today, new menu trainings on this day, team meetings on this day, and they can put it all in their calendars as and when. But yeah, we're trying to move away from WhatsApp. It's just not. Bless them.
There is something that we've started implementing within the Burnt Chef project over the last 2 months, which is a product called ZenZap, which we're not sponsored or endorsed by ZenZap, but for us, what spiked our curiosity was the fact it works almost identically to WhatsApp, but you can set your working schedule. And so when you're not available, it won't send you any messages. It won't notify you. You won't get missed notifications to show you how many missed messages you've got. And you say that out loud and you go, okay, that sounds pretty cool. But actually the difference it's made to actually switching off, I'll look at my phone on a Monday morning and go, I didn't get any messages over the weekend. And I'll go on there and there'll be people that have messaged out of, because we all have different shifts. So there'll be people that have messaged, but I wasn't aware of any of it. So it didn't take me out of my home life or my relaxation time. And the other key thing with it is as well is it allows you to hide phone numbers and things like that. So because of WhatsApp, once you're in a WhatsApp group, someone has your personal contact details. They can contact you whenever, whether it's GDPR compliant as well is another thing. So with ZenZap, it allows you to hide it. You can register by an email address or a phone number and hide it. So it's worth checking out. As I say, we're not endorsed, but for us, it's been, or for me personally, it's been very good, and hopefully my team will agree. My marketing director just come on saying ZenZap is a game changer. So well done, Emmy. Thank you. We've had a few questions come through and a few comments, which we'll go through at the end once we finish the questions. So if you have got any questions for our guests, or if there's something that you want to say, then pop it into the Facebook comments section or the LinkedIn comments section, and we'll go through that at the end. So talking about work-life balance support, work-life balance is a big one. 47% of shift workers say they're unhappy with their balance, and 76% I mean, that's 76% of managers report feeling burnt out themselves. So Louise, let's start with you. Having experienced burnout personally, what boundaries or changes have you made to protect your own well-being? And how do you support your team to try and do the same?
It's a difficult one. I'm still learning how to have better boundaries, let's say. I live in, so it's quite difficult for me to put the boundaries in place and not come down all the time and check on the team, make sure they're okay. I have started just getting in my car and leaving on my days off, just get out. We were in quite a difficult situation when I burnt myself out. But, you know, you do what you can for your business and your team. And you, at the time, I was like, have to protect the team. Can't burn the team out. I will just take everything. It's fine. And in actual fact, my management team then came to me and was like, you're useless at the minute. What are you doing? Like, go and nap, get out of here, go away. And it wasn't until they sat me down and was like, you're no good to any of us right now. I was like, oh, I've actually failed. I've burnt myself out and now I've failed my team. I should have relied on them a bit more. And then I wouldn't have burnt out. They're not going to burn out because we delegate little things and they take what they're good at. It was a massive learning curve. So now we have management meetings every 2 weeks and we go through clear steps and it's all documented and we can look at it throughout the week and go, I was supposed to do this. This person's doing this today. Fantastic. I don't have to worry about that. And they know unless the building is on fire, if it's my day off, they do not phone me. And it's so nice now. We actually have that clear-cut boundary of if I'm out, I'm out. And I do the same with them. If they're not here, we don't contact each other unless the building is on fire. Yeah, it was a really difficult learning curve for me. We got there eventually.
And even if the building is on fire, phone 999 first, or 911, depending on what country you're in, unless you're a reserve firefighter. Like, even then, you shouldn't be phoned. Emily, how do you support balance in your team? The tech sector is obviously equally as high pressure, especially when you're trying to keep up with the pace of hospitality. And how do you model that as a leader?
Great question. I've also got my AirPods in case the Spice Girls come up again. I'll put them in a second. I'm going to speak a little bit from my own personal experience here. And I think it can be applied to any industry, inclusive of hospitality, but certainly high pressure environments are kind of all that I've seen in my own career, I would say. And when you're leading a team, I think there are 3 kind of rules that I follow. So when the pressure ramps up, the first thing that I always do is acknowledge it. Like, acknowledge that things are stressful right now and we're in such an environment. So, I'll start a team huddle by saying something like, I see how everyone's feeling. The heat this week, like, just making it aware and letting it know that it's seen. It's not a taboo thing. We can talk about it, and that I'm tuned into their reality is, I think, really important as a leader. The second thing is to empathize, right? And so as much as I can, I'll try and assume good intent and be curious. So asking, what's the hardest part right now? And really trying to listen and not multitask. And I've definitely been guilty of this in the past, but, put that phone away, turn those WhatsApp notifications on when you're dealing in those high pressure situations and you're asking questions, be really tuned in. And then kind of, where possible, explaining that I get where they're coming from. And so I'll often say things like, I get that. It would really exhaust me too. And if I have relevant direct experience, so, Louise, whether that was you being on the waitstaff team or being behind the bar, whatever that was, acknowledging that you've been in that situation and you can really empathize with the situation that they're in. And then after those 2 things, it's how do we problem solve together, right? And so, in my team, it's potentially that somebody might have a higher workload or higher caseload than somebody else. So I'll ask, can we shift some of that load onto somebody else? And as much as possible, I'll try and involve my individual team members into the solution, right? So everybody's allowed to have that voice, everybody's allowed to put their own path forward, and it's less about, the management decree is coming down, and so you kind of avoid that disconnect, but really kind of those three things. And then lastly, I would say, as much as possible, model my own examples, right? So ensure that I do that same balance too. At the beginning of this, I just said I got back from a holiday the other day. I was away for about a week, and I'm grateful that I have the luxury to be able to do that. But I told everybody before I went off, I was like, I'm going off. I'm not taking my work laptop. I'm switching off all of my work things. I'm deleting my work email, my work Slack. I'm not going to be around. I'm really going to take the time for myself. If you need me, here's my emergency number. And of course, you have people in place, but I think it's so important that as leaders, we model that behavior of setting those boundaries apart, because it then really allows others to feel that they can truly enjoy the time that they disconnect, And so kind of those are the real things that I try and model during those high pressure situations.
Such a valuable point to take from that, which is not do as, it's that analogy, isn't it? Do as I say, don't do as I do. And we see, especially in leadership, that drives burnout, because everyone else is going, well, if they can do 80 hours and be available outside of work time, why can't I be able to do that? What's wrong with me? Why am I broken and damaged? And you're like, you're not, you're a human being. And
and I learned a crazy thing. I was at a different kind of summit a couple of weeks ago, and I might quote the exact number slightly wrong here, but it was something like 80% of staff's kind of like mental burnout is coming from their interactions with their direct leader. So their manager, their line manager, whoever, those interactions that they have with them, that's what they're thinking about. So the way that they communicated to me, what they did, how they said. And this was in a corporate setting, it might be slightly different in hospitality, but it really, that number was so large, it really struck me to the heart, where I was like, wow, the more that I can truly model that behavior for my team, I really hope they're not thinking about me in their late hours or in their weekends. But the reality was, I was definitely thinking about my own leader during those hours. And so it kind of resonated with me quite a bit. And so, do the best we can here.
Really poignant. Thank you. And Sarah, for yourself, how can tech help support better balance for managers and shift workers alike? And having worked in hospitality as well, can you talk not just about tech, but a bit about your own personal experience on how we manage and support work-life balance?
Yeah, I think we've talked a lot about the features and the fundamentals of what a tech system can do. So, repeatable shift patterns, and, I'm sure we're all playing with AI, and I know there's lots of exciting stuff coming, but, down the line, I don't think it's going to be too far of going, here's my problem statement, or here's my ask, or actually just make a recommendation. And then, you can get more complex than that. It can be things like, how does it integrate, like you mentioned, Zenz, but with your payroll, with other things, so that not only is your software that you're using to do your scheduling also creating that for you and creating it in a really effective way, but it's linking to all your other data sources, as Emily mentioned as well. And I think that's the thing where, for me, tech becomes powerful. It's not just using it to do one thing. It's thinking about what are all the other jobs that you've got to do. And, I think payroll's probably an easy one to use as an example. It's arduous. It needs to happen. It has to happen every month, and it's time critical, right? So if you know that you have this repeatable thing, actually using a scheduling solution that has inbuilt comms, as well as connects with your existing payroll or provides that. I think we have connections with many POS providers, and a lot of people will want to say these two things interconnect, or they'll go, no way, I didn't realize I could do that. And actually, by solving one problem here, you're actually having a cascade effect. And I think for me, that's where I see the power of technology. And, my team will know this well. My thing as a leader is operational excellence, and I treat it I call it our heartbeat, what's our rhythm, and that is checking our metrics right on this date and this date, and it is doing the scheduling on this date and this date, and I have to hold myself to account to my organization, and it's really hard to get it in place, but I know once I have, that's the solution. So it is really chicken and egg, so picking up on what Emily said, I've put a rhythm in place, because that is the beat of the drum that helps us fill those gaps in. And then I can handle the irregular beats occasionally. Whereas when it's just erratic all the time, you know, it's hard for anyone to see kind of, you know, the wood for the trees at that point. And I think other things like the Planday app is one of the things we hear about constantly. So, Louise, you know, we realize people might still be tied to their phones, tied to WhatsApp, but actually the Planday app is one of the features that employees consistently say is their favorite thing to their managers about us, because then it's still on your phone. You can still access it in the kind of the same way. And then in there, you've got your messaging and your scheduling. So trying to say, actually, we know you're not a B2B industry. We know you're not necessarily facing some of the same ways of working with your team, but it's still a lot of the same challenges. So how can we look to really kind of bridge that gap? And then from my own experience, I think it is trying to create repeatable patterns. We kind of call it I have an old manager who used to call it, you've got to build the plane while flying it sometimes. But if you never build the plane, you're always going to be doing it simultaneously. And working in tech is not dissimilar to having worked in hospitality. I worked for the 𝗣𝗿𝗀𝗀 group, so it was large hotels. So who doesn't love a room service in a 500-room hotel at midnight when all you want to do is not walk any further from the late night bar and hope no one comes in so you can close down? But actually, tech is not dissimilar. It's who I work with that keeps me going. It's being passionate about what I'm doing, and we see tech as an enabler to creating more human experiences. So let's do this stuff so that you can have that team dinner at the start of a shift or at the end of a shift. And like Emily said, or Louise said, you're all in it together. And that is the same for me through tech and hospo. The more you're a team, the more kind of shared bonding and then sometimes shared trauma, like it holds you together. So yeah, I think it's the balance of how one creates more space for the other.
Yeah, I love that analogy of a heartbeat. You know, I reflect back to, obviously we're still in scale-up phase at the moment, being 6 years old, and you think back to what our heartbeat is at time, and sometimes you might need a defibrillator just to put it back on track. You know?
Yeah, definitely.
It's erratic. The other thing that I found useful recently is when it comes down to communication and work-life balance and elements like that. Whilst you think you've got it nailed, sometimes the reality is that your team think very differently. And we've just finished a 360 review of the CEO, and communication was one of those things. And it was an area which I thought I was like really, really clear on, but actually it turns out that communication wasn't being seen as clear in certain, or too frantic, you know. And so having that space and that psychological safety to accept that feedback and to be able to learn and develop is not just the same for communication, but it's for work-life balance, for benefits, perks, for systems, all of that sort of stuff. Allow your team to feed that back to you, and you can then curate something that's more all-encompassing, which I find quite poignant and relevant to that particular point. So 24% of hospitality workers say that they feel truly valued by their leaders. And obviously recognition is not only key to retention, but it also helps improve engagement as well. And in a fast-paced industry, whether it's tech, whether it's hospitality, often enough, we're too busy thinking about the next task. And sometimes recognition can get left behind. So Louise, how do you make sure that your teams feel seen and appreciated?
So we're always big on birthdays, love a birthday celebration. Anytime it's anyone's birthday, the WhatsApp chat goes nuts, absolutely bonkers. Everybody's on there. Happy birthday, happy birthday. It's so small, but it just, the whole team are behind everyone on there. If we have, say, a really good week, we've smashed budget out the park and everything, anytime someone comes on, they'll read the brief and I'll be like, guess what? And I'll show them the email and we'll have a little celebration together. I wasn't very good when I came here and I started this role at celebrating the wins of the business, and the team did communicate that back to me and were like, we'd like to know how the business is doing. So I did have to get a lot better. We recently hit a very big milestone. So that went in our chats and we were like, guess what, guys, we've just hit this. Anytime anyone does a good job or someone goes above and beyond, you know, this amazing surveys come in or an incredible review that goes straight on, and I'm like, well done for this. This is amazing. Keep it up. Look at how happy you've made our guests. You know, the housekeepers, when someone's like, oh, the room was just immaculate. I've never seen a hotel room so clean. The housekeeper was lovely. And I'm like, oh, look what we've got. And I run upstairs and I'm like, well done. And I'm showing them. And we celebrate everything here. Absolutely everything. It doesn't matter how big or how small. We take every single win and turn it into a massive thing, because it's just great to celebrate everything. And it keeps the entire team upbeat and positive. And, you know, if you get a 1-star review come through and the person sees their name on it, they'll be like, it's only one. Look at all the good ones that I've got. And it kind of balances out, so you don't have the mental health dip of, oh, I've done awful. You've still got, it's just one, it's fine.
Yeah.
Look at all of the good ones.
It's good. Thank you for sharing as well. And Emily, many businesses have high performance settings, and how does technology help recognize high performance and also make it meaningful as well, and endorse that human connection?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And I'm personally very passionate about this, as I drafted and created our global rewards and recognition program for our account management team at Square. But I'm not talking about this from a hospitality sector here. I think it's two key things. One is about data-driven performance insights, and then tying recognition to those real numbers, right? So if I kind of break those out, I would say in a high-pressure kitchen or your front of your house, you know, eyeballing who might be crushing it versus coasting it can sometimes feel subjective depending on like when and what you're seeing something, right? But by feeding every transaction tip shift into a central place that you can see in either the Square dashboard or the team management, you can pull real metrics. And so things like sales per server, average ticket size by bartender, you know, countertop versus mobile orders by a barista. You take all of that kind of guesswork out of it, and you really make it a science around who has performed the best in a kind of really data-driven way. And you can pull lots of different reports and decide for yourself who and what should get a shout out. And so I think, you know, after you figure kind of those data points out, it's tying recognition into that. And in doing so, you make recognition feel earned rather than arbitrary. And so, you know, with one of our apps, the Shifts app, you can pin like a team member of the week badge directly to their rota, or you can add congratulations, Chris, you sold the most upsells this week. No, that pops up whenever somebody clocks into that week. And so because everything is living in that same ecosystem, that kudos isn't lost in a group chat that maybe, you know, somebody else didn't see until the following day, or it isn't just personal to you, but it's in a really public place, which can mean a lot to a lot of people, and it shows up alongside the shifts that you're working in. And so, you know, if you want to amplify that moment in other ways, kind of, you know, Louise, you were talking about a lot of very personal ways in which you guys celebrate, you can absolutely do that. So potentially you have a chalkboard in your break room, or you send weekly emails out, you know, however it is that you like to recognize, you have the ability to do that based on the data-driven insights. And I think the most important thing I've learned as a leader, and I think this is for any industry or sector that you're in, is that you also need to tune into how your people like to be recognized and rewarded. Some people like something a bit more tangible, you know, so maybe it's you give them a £5 gift voucher to something, but other people really want public recognition. And once you're tuned in to the ways in which people want to be recognized and rewarded, backing that up in true data really makes them feel like it was earned. And I think that's how you keep a really happy and functional team growing in a successful way.
That's such a valuable point, and especially when you're working on a global reward and recognition program, that's, you know, that's got weight behind it.
It was a lot, and like, you know, obviously for tech it's in different things, but I think in any industry it's really those two key points. It's data driven, so you make it a science, less of an art, and then you recognize in the way that people want to.
Amazing. And we often talk about that from a mental health perspective, is like, you know, especially within hospitality and an industry that is most or every venue has access to alcohol. You don't want to be rewarding someone for their year's service with a crate of beer or a couple of bottles of wine if they're actually teetotal or they're a recovering alcoholic. So being thoughtful about your recognition and making sure that it fits the individual and based on their preferences is also a fantastic point that you've made. So really good. Thank you. And Sarah, how can tech support a culture of recognition, and what sort of data can play a role with this?
Yeah, so I think similar to, you know, what Emily said, obviously you can use data that's related to your business goals, KPIs, you know, like upsell. I've been to restaurants myself where they're actually quite transparent about their competitions, and they're like, we're running a competition to see who sells the most churros tonight, and like I'm on the leaderboard up there. And, you know, that's a quite fun way to, I think, make it like jovial and stuff like that as well. I think, you know, data within your systems around like things like positive responses, you know, mention semantic analysis is something that is more and more present in certain systems. So, you know, if you can see that XYZ employee has had consistent mentions on social or you know, a rating website or anything like that, that's something that you would be a like nice positive tangible element where you could reward. I think it's an interesting transition point for the hospitality industry, or, you know, like industries that sit on that kind of crossover between B2C and B2B, because actually, you know, you don't necessarily want to target this human individual in a really specific like way of here's that KPI. And, you know, Louise, you mentioned people can be a bit scared of technology, and actually maybe some of that hesitancy might root from that feeling, but actually looking at this is from a place of being able to say, how do we create more experiences like that and give you the capacity to create more experiences like that by saying, hey, Emily, you've been killing it the last 6 weeks. What's going on for you? Oh, well, I've just loved this new regular shift pattern, and actually you added Chris to the shift, and like we work really well together, and it's given me some space to go do this thing. And I think that is that's what it is. It's empowerment of creating spaces for your team to create suggestions and actually go, cool, can you go and implement it? And how can you make that happen for us? Because I've definitely been in Louise's position where, you know, you become that person that's the linchpin, and you think you're helping everyone, but you're not helping yourself. You're not putting your own kind of life vest on first. And not only if you're not doing that, can you not kind of help those people around you? And the other thing is, you mentioned it as well, Louise, actually people want to know the performance of the business that they work in. I think when I was younger, you know, it wasn't like that. You went to work and, you know, your job was fairly secure, and you did your job and you came home. And actually, you know, I'm looking at the cohort of us here, I think we're probably not too dissimilar in what generational period we fit into. And that absorption of like that mid-level management responsibility, I actually see when I give my team the empowerment, they're so solution orientated. They know so many fixes that I wouldn't have known. And I think that's the opportunity of like the peer-to-peer sharing and using the data in a positive manner to say, this isn't to control or manage. This is to go, let's highlight something that's working well or address challenges and look how we can best support you. And I think coming at it from that perspective means that you can use data in a way that isn't felt like, you know, we're not Big Brother here, we're all humans just trying to make sure that the business is secure so that you feel secure in your job and we all can, like, you know, have a great time.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting point, is that there is a culture shift when it comes down to that openness of dialogue around things like finances, etc. And, you know, I communicate with my team regularly on where we are, what's our cash flow looking like. But I remember years ago, probably about 20 years ago, I went for a sales manager role, and I sat down in an interview. And they said, why do you want to work for this organization? I said, well, I've done my due diligence. Your finances are looking super strong. Your culture seems great. And they were like, what do you mean our finances? I was like, well, I took a look at your financial records just to make sure that, you know, you're a solvent business. And they were like, we don't like that at all. Well, that shouldn't have been seen. And I was like, oh, but it has changed now. It has changed. People are looking at that sort of information to make sure that culturally, work-life balance, communication are all up there, but also that they feel part of something bigger, you know, a purpose-driven enterprise.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, Chris, I mean, like, you know, we can't shy away of the reality of like the world. You know, there has been, you know, increased redundancies. We know hospitality is a challenging space. And actually, I think for me, you know, anxiety roots in like the unknown, and not knowing something is often the seed for you all to grow. And we all know how people talk in kitchens and in bars and whatever. And actually, transparency, and like Emily said, the first thing you do is acknowledge the reality of a scenario and go, well, we're all in this together, and bringing in that teamwork. I think people know, you know, the more you're aware of your business and the more you're aware, the better you can support them in ensuring that you have a happy workplace that is going to be consistent, and also you feel safe and secure in over a long period of time. And I think for me, that's the shift. You know, there's no hiding away from it. So why not have the openness and transparency?
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's, we have run out of time. We've overrun, which I both thank you for, and I also apologize for anyone who might have missed a next appointment. But we've had a couple of statements come through that I just wanted to point out. So Kiran says, I felt even burnout when I really wanted to work in an industry, but employers chose to prefer whom they pay less than me. John Stapleforth loves the shift notes on the rota. He says it's an awesome idea. James Hill, who works in hospitalities but studying to be a counsellor currently, says communication is key. Counselling skills should be taught in schools, providing young people with a foundation ready to go into work and higher education. And then finally, Mark Henry says days off. You need to build trust and empowerment to your staff, but prioritizing days off seems to be the key message there for him. So I just want to thank you all, Louise, Sarah, Emily, for all of your really valuable points, and for joining us on the first of this series. We've had so much engagement. It's something that people are really buying into, and we're very keen to learn more about. So thank you for sharing your experiences. If you're interested in learning more about the Manager's Toolkit, if you just head to any browser, any search engine, and type in Planday Manager's Toolkit, you can download that and you'll be able to get access to the report data and also the top tips there for managers. And then we have our 2 LinkedIn Lives coming up. So our first one is on the 18th of June, Wednesday, the 18th of June at 11 o'clock till 12 o'clock in the morning. And that's going to be around retention and recruitment. And then we have our following one on Tuesday, the 8th of July at 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And that's going to be how to identify and avoid burnout from a more personal level. So again, thank you to all of my guests today, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.